Evening, everybody. Welcome to Prepper Fitness YouTube channel. Welcome to Prepper Fitness Movie Reviews. You're joined today by Jack, a very good friend of mine and a
What's
friend
going
of
on,
mine.
buddy?
Not much, man. How are you?
Good, good. Just got
Good.
done running with the dog outside.
Yeah, practicing what you preach on staying in shape.
Yep.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. So, in continuation of the concepts that we spoke on last week, we're going to go ahead and give a movie review on The Trigger Effect. This
Correct.
is a movie that was produced in 1996. Am I correct, Jack?
That's correct.
Awesome. And in doing this, what we aim to provide to you, the viewers, is approaching this entire movie and approaching a lot of the key events that took place throughout the movie and talking about where the main characters may have messed up from a preparedness and an emergency preparedness standpoint, giving some some social commentary along the way, and talking about potential alternative actions and or philosophies that they could have used to come out on the other end of the situation a little bit better.
Yep.
So with that, we'll do our best not to go ahead and reveal too much, give too many spoilers, but just understand by the very nature of this, some of the spoilers are just going to come.
Yeah,
So with
that's part of reviews.
yeah. So with that, Jack, I know that you have a lot of notes on this. Would you care to kick us off?
Sure. So, as Andrew stated before, this movie was made in 1996. It has two um, key male leading figures and one leading female figure. They've been in several other movies. The interesting about this movie is when it came out in the late 90s, uh, this movie was based on a localized blackout. The movie didn't get, I didn't know if it was budgetary reasons or not, but it didn't get too big into the world view of things. It's more of a localized SHTF situation, which I actually prefer um, those kind of movies.
So just to clarify, Jack, the premise of the movie is these characters and the community they live in, they're experiencing a long-term blackout. Is that right?
In a localized setting, yes.
Okay. And so that sort of sets the stage for a lot of the issues that they start to experience. Can you tell us a little bit more
Yes.
about that?
So, one thing that's kind of interesting before we get off into the key points is I don't know if our viewers experience this. More than likely they did um, with the recent AT&T outage, widespread outage. Um, People reacted very quickly, and this movie kind of touches that same basis on a local level about just something as simple as a blackout. In a very short period of time, people can start making bad decisions. Um,
That's a great
so
point. So for
yes,
the viewers here, this video is being recorded February 2023 in year 2000. Forgive me, I'm all tongue-tied. This video is being recorded in late February of 2024. We recently experienced a nationwide AT&T outage.
yeah,
I'm not sure of all the specifics. I'm hearing stuff on social media. We all know how accurate social media can be, but there was an outage for whatever reason. Maybe it was a cyber attack, maybe it was a glitch, who knows?
right.
But lots of people were without the ability to use their cell phones to communicate, to call 911.
Or
They were
even
not,
work.
they weren't even able to call work. They weren't able to communicate with loved ones. So that is actually something that we saw, especially in the area where I'm in. There was at least some degree of social panic that was taking place.
Mhm.
And that's not even everybody getting taken off of the grid. That's just
That's
a
one provider.
provider. And the grid wasn't even down. We still had electricity. We still had food and water. Unrest simply because of that. And even my local, I live in a major metropolitan area. Jack lives just outside of a major metropolitan area. Our local police forces were issuing statements that were trying to go ahead and put people at ease and had the opposite effect. So it
Mhm.
actually made people more unnerved.
Right.
So,
I,
this,
I I think I read where one sheriff's office said, "Please don't." call 911 just to check to see if it's working because it's overrunning their system.
Yeah, exactly. So the chaos that's being seen from a very small issue like that, even in the last couple of years, you and I, Jack, we made it through the Texas snowstorm.
Yep, that was extreme.
Yeah, and we saw completely without power due to all of the ice that was taxing the infrastructure.
Hmm.
Um, Lots of stories from that, but all of this is to say that thinking about these types of things, reviewing some of the concepts that are covered in this video, it's extraordinarily important for
Yes.
preppers. It's extraordinarily important for the everyday average Joe, average citizen. It's important for anyone and everyone who interacts and lives with other human beings. It's just the way of the
Hmm.
world. We're very fortunate to live in a first world country where we don't see massive power outages all the time unless you live in California. But that may not always be the case. And so, with that,
Yeah, look at this movie. I mean, cell phones were just starting to become a thing in the late 90s, you know? Um, and even a lot of the major critics of this movie were saying, "Oh, that's not something that's not realistic. That's not going to happen." Like they were poo-pooing the movie and it's like, no, that's very realistic. Like that's been happening the
well,
last few years.
yeah, well, before we get into some of the key points that you had to go on for this evening, Jack, can you tell us some of the things that critics were saying about this movie that were unrealistic to believe, things that wouldn't actually happen in that event, those kinds of events?
So they were saying like on the social aspect, like people wouldn't break down or react that quickly. We've seen otherwise in recent
If if
recent
you
things.
were if you were in Texas during Snowmageddon, you realize how quickly that whole thing fell apart, and just the social unrest,
They said
burglary.
that the spoiler alert, they said that the price gouging at the shop was unrealistic.
We saw that again during the health crisis that we've experienced over the last couple of years with all the supply chain issues that we've had. How just due to all of the tax in the supply chain and the tax in the infrastructure, just how prices skyrocketed on certain items. Uh, for our viewers that may be viewing this video much later on in the future, look up the toilet paper issue
Oh, it
that
was crazy.
took place for something as basic as toilet paper.
They were
Cases of
fighting.
during the snowstorm here in Texas where we didn't have power for a week. You can mention to the viewers what you were seeing going on with cases of water during that time.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were the giant, what is it, 32 or 48 the big case of water
Mhm.
um at your Costco's, if you don't have Costco's, your Sam's, your wholesale retail places, you could get those for two, $3 at the time. Um and then during that outage and the price gouging, I went to a store within walking distance of where I was living. There was no large cases left. There was just little small packs. I think it's like 4 or 6 bottles,
Mhm.
$5 cash.
Wow. Wow. So,
And now that's cheap because the cases are now $6 with our inflation and the economy, but that's a totally different story.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So again, this movie was produced in 1996. Y2K hadn't even taken place yet. Or I
right,
should say the anticipation of Y2K hadn't even taken place
right.
yet. We certainly hadn't fast forwarded the clock 20 years yet to the whole health crisis and all of the issues that were associated with that.
Hmm.
So a lot of the events that unfolded in this movie are very relevant to things that are going
Extremely,
on.
extremely
So
relevant. Even the
I
social
thought,
issues.
yeah, I thought it was a great movie. I really did think
Yeah,
it was a great movie. I think it's very much worth a watch. But again, to go ahead and give our viewers a little bit more understanding of some of the prepper concepts that we should be taking into consideration as
sure.
this movie, what do you got, Jack?
So my number one that I wrote down for the trigger effect, my number one is know your spouse or your partner.
big one. Jack, can you elaborate on that? So for the viewers watching this, we haven't yet seen the movie and are considering maybe investing in renting the movie, watching it on a Saturday night. Essentially, the movie focuses primarily on a husband and wife,
Mhm.
and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, right? Or
But
best
I'm sorry,
friends?
I'm sorry, the husband's best friend.
Yeah, best friend,
Yeah,
best
yeah.
friend.
I apologize. So when Jack says that you need to be conscientious of the quality of woman that you're having a relationship with, whether it's your wife, your girlfriend, whatever the case may be, this was actually one of my bullet points too. During the course of the film, this disaster is unfolding. They're
Mhm.
without power for what they think is only going to be an hour or two, and it ends up being several weeks without power. And that's just the beginning of the movie. And throughout the stress of that, this woman starts having way too much fun with the alcohol, and she starts becoming highly promiscuous.
Yes.
Okay. That causes a lot of issues throughout the movie. But more specifically, it starts causing immediate issues right there in their immediate family or social circle inside of their home.
Right.
That has the potential in a life-threatening emergency situation to put you in a highly, highly precarious situation, to say the least.
Yeah, so you got to know your partner. What are their views on things? What are their views on prepping? Do they think it's crazy? Do they think your ideas are silly? If so, maybe that's how they were up, you know, that's what their upbringing was. Give them a chance, don't automatically kick them to the curb. But in that situation, you don't want to get to the situation they got to without truly knowing your significant other. You know what I mean? He's
100%.
finding out all these things about his wife when he needs to be worrying about other things.
Yeah. And that's a good point, man. Like, you don't want to be getting married to somebody that you think you know, and then when SHTF takes place, they're going and they're doing all kinds of degenerate, promiscuous things. Okay, that is not the time to be worried about that. You've got bigger things you need to worry about. And you need to be, if you're gonna, for all the men out there that are watching this, if you're gonna be involved with a woman, and this actually takes place in the movie itself, when the social fabric of society breaks down, traditional gender roles start coming back into play. So if you're going to be required to be responsible for your family's security and your family's safety, you need to know that your family, whether it's wife or kids, that they are going to be compliant,
Or back
that
you up on it. Yeah.
up. Your woman has to be ride or die for you,
Hmm.
100%. And that was not the case in this movie. That
No.
woman is rebellious, she is disobedient, and her actions throughout the movie make a bad situation even worse. That
And was
is not.
constantly undermining too.
That's another thing too, is again, I can't recommend all this enough. And Jack, a good example of this, being a leader of your family and your family understanding that, hey, dad is the leader. Okay. This is an emergency situation. We are potentially in danger here. Dad, your kids need to view you as a superhero. Your
Hmm.
wife needs to respect you. And so all of that framework, all of that foundation has to be established way before you get into a situation like this, because it's
Hmm.
going to be tested and already very stressful when you're in that kind of situation. So,
And it's not to discredit blame on the husband because he has plenty of blame as well. The wife was seeking a man, and when his best friend came into the picture, she's seeing man here and she's seeing husband here.
he was more masculine. He was more of a
That
leader.
doesn't need to be the
Yeah,
situation.
it doesn't need to be the situation, man. It doesn't.
You already had an issue with wife having these secrets or these feelings, and then it just got compounded, just like everything
Yeah,
in that movie got compounded.
it's a
Um,
really good point. You got to be a leader. You got to be someone that your wife's gonna look up to. Right?
And if you're my sister was one. If you're a country girl and you grew up in the country and you shoot and self-defense and your husband is the one undermining you, get that crap in order. You know what I mean? Like
It's
you got to do
unfortunate,
what
but
you need to do.
that's the dynamic people find themselves in. So
Yeah.
whatever your
Um,
situation is,
yeah.
uh, keep your
Just
stuff under
be on the same level.
control.
Try to
Be on
be
the
as
same
close.
page.
Yeah. Like if this happens, we're gonna do this. Cool.
Mm,
Got it. Um, number two, I had know your neighbors.
It's a good one. Would you care to elaborate, Jack? Give us a little bit of context for that.
Sure. So in this particular movie, like I stated earlier, this is more of a localized situation. They mention about how there's looting and rioting in the city, which is definitely going to happen.
Yeah,
Any SHTF, it's going to happen, folks. Just know
yeah,
that it's going to happen and be prepared for it to
it's
happen.
coming. It's coming.
This
It's
is in a suburban setting outside of the city, so it will gradually filter into the suburban neighborhoods, right? Well, you should probably know your neighbors. What are their views on things? Are they secure? Are they prepared? Are they unprepared? Are they vultures? Are they criminals? I mean, all of these things become vitally important in a localized SHTF situation. Can you rely on them? Are you willing to give them particular information about your current situation? In most cases, I would say no. Um, so, is your neighbor trustworthy enough for them to know, hey, if they're in a bad situation, can they come to you? That's about as far as I would give information to my neighbor about what my current situation is.
to provide some more context to Jack's point here. So throughout the course of the movie, as they're going longer and longer without power, the neighborhood becomes more and more panicked. And during
Mm-hmm.
their panic, they start huddling outside, they start meeting with each other to see if they can exchange information and just talk about what's taking place the world over.
Right.
During the course of these conversations, people are people. They start talking, they start revealing more about themselves than they probably should. To give the viewers an example of what I'm talking about, the place, the neighborhood, and the world as we know it is without power. And they
Mm-hmm.
find out through all of that gossip and all that talking that there's somebody in the neighborhood that has a generator.
Uh-oh.
And a bunch of scared, angry people, knowing that somebody in the neighborhood has power or access to power and they don't, that starts causing a lot of issues
Mob
and,
mentality.
and mob mentality. And so throughout the course of an emergency situation, to Jack's point, if you don't know your neighbors, if you don't know what their belief systems is, if they share the same values as you, or if they're just backed into a corner and they're normally good people, but they have mouths to feed, or they perceive the situation being more severe than it actually is, you don't want people knowing that you have something that they need that they don't have themselves. It's dangerous. It's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. And so it causes issues throughout the film for both the main characters and the side characters.
And then also knowing that your old grouchy neighbor across the street is actually a BA, since we don't want to curse on here.
Yeah.
Thank God he came in to save them, right? No spoilers, but man. I think
Yeah.
that perfectly leads into my point number three, which is operational security, or as others like to say, OPSEC.
Good point. So OPSEC throughout the course of this movie, again, people are people. They do what they do. You're without power for several weeks. You have limited resources. No matter what area you're in, whether it's a suburban area or the inner city, high income area, low income area, people have vices and they start doing what they do. So in the
Mm-hmm.
course of this movie, there starts becoming some gambling to pass the time. There starts coming a point where people are going and they're playing cards, rolling dice, and throughout that, people start letting off more information than they should, spending too much time around each other with getting buzzed and playing cards. And you come to realize that some of those people have access to certain types of security that the other neighbors become curious about. So that starts causing some issues throughout the film.
Yep. Yep. Try to be real conscientious of your operational security. For
Not everybody
instance,
needs to know what you have.
yeah, maybe that neighbor who needs some mouths to feed, you're like, man, I barely have enough for my family, but what do you have to offer? And I can give you a little bit. That way it doesn't make it seem like you've got 2 to 3 years worth of food and water, stored up
Yeah,
in there. You kind of have to be a gambling man and have poker face, you know what I mean?
yeah. If a community is going without power and resupply and groceries and stuff for several weeks at a time, no one needs to know that you have a few
A
months of food
generator.
or a generator, a few months of food stored up for you and your family to feed you and your kids. Okay, people as a whole don't need to know that.
Oh,
And that whole concept of savior syndrome starts becoming an issue. So I
mhm.
think OPSEC was a huge component of this movie. And I think the main characters and really all those side characters throughout that initial phase of the movie, I think they all could have done a way better job of
Yep.
maintaining operational security. There's another point too with operational security. There are crimes committed throughout this movie. And throughout the course of these crimes being committed, people expose certain weapons that they have that they probably shouldn't have legally had.
Yeah.
Again, operational security. People don't need to know those kinds of things.
Yep.
You get a little too excited, maybe perhaps you overreact. Well, that's going to cause some issues. So operational security is a huge deal.
And then I think that one we're perfectly flowing into the next points. Number 4 for me is humanitarian or politically correct culture versus security. Kind of like what you're talking about, maybe instead of getting together, the sharing of information was great. That was good.
Yeah.
Come together as a neighborhood, share, hey, what do you got? What do you know? What is this saying? But giving out all your food or your electricity, probably not a good idea. Humanitarian, trying to make everyone happy, politically correct, probably not a good idea. You might be seen as a grouch if you say those famous 2-letter words. No, you
Yeah.
should practice practice saying that word, right? And then
Well,
security actually going out and handling a situation that needs to be handled. That's not humanitarian. That's doing what needs to be done. Forming a neighborhood watch instead of gossiping is probably a better idea for that neighborhood.
absolutely. That would have been a way more productive use of time is putting together a neighborhood watch as opposed to, hey, we're all just going to drink wine in the living room. And that actually happened in the movie. A lot of the neighbors get together in a living room and they start drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't need to be drinking alcohol in an SHTF situation. Okay. There's a lot of reasons why when things are going south, you need to be of a completely sober mind
Mhm.
because you need to have your wits about you. So I think to your point, absolutely, the neighborhood watch may have been a much more productive use of time. Something else that you said was very interesting. This is actually one of my points, and we touched base on this before we met tonight, but you touched on the point of saying no and how sometimes saying no can set you up to seem like the bad guy or a grouch. I think that one of the points I would focus on in this movie and something that the viewer can take and start using and practicing and utilizing in their day-to-day life in preparation for their own SHTF event is start practicing now the art of saying no to people. And what I mean by that is most people who walk the face of this earth, they're yes men or yes women.
Hmm.
Most people are people pleasers. And there's a lot of psychological reasons for that. In the early days of humanity, we were hunters and gatherers. So getting acceptance by the group, and even today it's a huge deal, but especially back then, getting acceptance from the group was the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
So absolutely, there is an evolutionary and survival component to why people want to go and be people pleasers. But most people in their everyday lives, they're going to their average jobs and they're just used to being punching bags all day.
Yeah.
They go to work and their boss gives them hell. They don't know how to tell their boss no. They don't know how to tell their coworkers no. They don't know how to go into their own home and lovingly and gracefully telling their family no or their wives no.
Right.
So they have been conditioned their whole lives that when things are even just very socially uncomfortable, here when times are good and the power's on, I can't tell people no. And so most people, if you really think about most of the viewers that are listening to this or watching this, I want you to think back in memories of your own life where you're oftentimes caught doing things that you really didn't want to be doing, but you wanted to make this person happy. Okay. If you don't practice, if you don't exercise, if you don't train those muscles associated with giving people a very respectful, a very loving, but a very firm no, if you don't practice that now and develop that now when times are good, when times are bad, it's going to unfold in a nasty way, the way that it did in this movie. So in this movie, the main character goes into a gas station in the city, a place that still has food, and some of the locals are still trying to be there and cook some food, cook steaks, have a burger and all that. They're trying to go ahead and, in light of the situation, still live somewhat normally. And when the guy is leaving that gas station, there is a hitchhiker who is essentially demanding that that guy take him and give him a ride somewhere. Okay.
Hmm.
The guy can tell you, it's very evident to the viewer that you can tell that the main character has a bad feeling about this guy, doesn't like this guy, and he doesn't want this guy anywhere near his wife or his friend. Okay. It's very clear. The guy does not have the ability to tell the person no. And
Yep.
here's the thing, this person that was being very assertive in demanding a ride, the guy didn't pull out a weapon. The guy didn't threaten him. The guy didn't say that he was going to kill him if he didn't give him a ride. He was just being way overbearing as he was
Yeah.
demanding this. Okay. So there's not even an upfront threat of violence. There's always, in every interaction that we have in life as men, there's always the potential, the underlying potential for violence. But this had not escalated at that point. The guy wasn't
Right.
being blatantly threatened. And in absence of being blatantly threatened, he did not have the ability, he did not have the intestinal fortitude to tell a complete stranger no.
Someone he owes nothing to.
Someone he owes nothing to, because human beings are afraid of confrontation. Even if there's no fists or weapons involved in those confrontations, human beings don't like fighting. They don't like being at ends with other people. So I invite everybody in the audience to go out into your day-to-day life and don't be rude, don't be hateful, be loving in everything that you do. But I highly recommend that you start very respectfully, but very firmly practicing the art of telling people no.
It may seem non-politically correct, but an easy one to practice that art on. How many times have you gone to a gas station and someone randomly comes up to you because they're targeting you, they're watching you, they're seeing what you look like, your car you're driving, what clothes
Mhm.
you're wearing, and they see you pumping gas and they say, "Hey, sorry, my family and I were on a trip. Can we just get $5 to get down to the next road?" Do you know how many people they've told that story to?
Yeah,
But you don't
100%,
want to say no, and so you just
100%.
go ahead and give them the $5. That's an easy one to practice it on. Easy.
Absolutely. 100%. It's a very easy way of going about and starting to do it. Also, like here again, I live in a major metropolitan area. There's a bunch of vagrants walking around here demanding cash, demanding handouts, demanding whatever the case may be. Okay. Regardless of what your social or political opinions on that, that's a golden opportunity to learn how to tell people no.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you think learning how to tell people no is not a big deal. Really, it is. It's going to benefit you when it's appropriate. Telling people no is a good thing. Okay.
Mhm.
You can't please everybody. And
Mhm.
so if you can practice that now when times are good, when times are bad and the stakes are a lot higher, it may serve you well. So to the viewers, again, without giving out too much information, by not telling that guy no in the movie, as a result of that, someone ends up getting seriously injured.
Yeah.
Okay. As a result of not being able to tell that guy no. So again, think about that from a preparedness standpoint. These are just things to consider.
And then point number 5 is, can you get to where you need to go without GPS?
That's a really good one, man. That's a golden one. So here, at the time of the recording of this video, we just had the AT&T towers go down. People are all over social media talking after the fact, saying that they went through that whole process and they didn't know how to get home from work. Okay. How do you
How
not
many
know how to
times
get
do you
How
drive?
many times do you drive home from work, dude? Like driving the same route to and from work for years and they don't know how to get back, man.
You gotta pay attention.
And
Simple observation skills.
or even something just as basic as, yeah, maybe I haven't driven this route before, but I'm at least familiar enough with my geography to where basic thing is, okay, I can more or less tell where I'm at. Like in my background here, downtown Austin. Okay, if you're in downtown Austin, if you look up and you can see, like, for example, the tower, the UT tower, you can more or less kind of figure, okay, this is where I'm at in approximation to everything else. I can
And I know
figure
where they
out,
need to go.
yeah, and more or less I know the direction. I'll start seeing things will start looking familiar, and I can figure it out, but
Yeah.
just insane that people couldn't figure that out.
Someone made a joke at my work that this guy, he's been working for 20 plus years. He had to put GPS in to get to the Whataburger that was 1 block away. And he's
Oh,
been,
wow.
how many
Yeah,
times has he gone to this Whataburger in his whole career, you know? But yeah, I guess it's part of that age we live in now. Especially if people are watching this in the future, I imagine it's only going to get worse.
yeah,
Um, Andrew and I grew up in the times where we had to remember 10, 12 different phone numbers because
yeah.
we didn't have
If you didn't know it, you
contact
didn't know
contact
it.
sheets or lists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even touch a cell phone until I think my senior year of high school. And I think I finally got exposure to one. Even then, it was a really cheap, clunky, not a, it wasn't the smartphone that we have today.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, if you didn't know those numbers, dude, you didn't have those numbers written down somewhere, someone wasn't getting called.
yeah. Practice, even though you got your GPS going, practice reading those signs. You know, they say like
Yeah.
east and west and north. That's the direction you're going on a highway or you're gonna get to. So
How do you feel about people just having a basic map of their area in their car or in their
significant,
backpack? Yeah,
significant. But
learning how to
then
read that.
back in the day, it wasn't a problem. Everyone knew how to read a map, but now that's an additional skill that a lot of people are going to have to learn
It's
is how to
insane.
read a map. Yeah.
You know, one of the first things that I did when I moved to this area is I didn't get in my car. So, you know, the years, you know me, I like to ride, I like to, go cycling, get on my road
Mm-hmm.
bike and ride miles. I go around a couple miles. I got on my bike, not my car, but my bike, put on all my cycling gear, and I took that major cycling greenway that goes through my area. And I just started looking at landmarks, not streets, but just landmarks. Hey, there's a landmark
Yep.
here.
Yep.
Downtown is on my right-hand shoulder when I'm doing this, and I can see more or less certain landmarks in downtown. It's okay, this is more or less where I'm going.
Yep. One of my next points for this movie is, do you have proper medicine?
Good point. Good point. Can you give us some context, Zach? I mean, Jack.
So in this movie, the husband and wife have a newborn baby. is it newborn or it's still a baby, very, very young.
Very young.
And it has a particular illness that needs a particular medicine. And that's not a good situation to be in, for one.
Even in just in
Um,
regular times, that's not a
yeah.
good situation. Yeah.
But do you just have your basic, antibiotics, first aid, basic gauze, your very, very basic, and you can go to a fire station and get this stuff. If you didn't know that, you can go to a fire station, say, hey, can I get, some gauze and some antibiotics? And usually they'll give it out to you depending on where you're at.
Yeah. They might have to tell you
So
and say, is this guy, what are his
yeah,
intentions? He might give you, he
yeah,
might press you, but they're
yeah,
usually pretty quick to help you out.
yeah.
Something else that you brought up a really good point with medicine and antibiotics. So for our viewers that are listening to this, who may have a chronic illness that requires medication, people that are taking diabetes medication, blood pressure medication, um, all kinds of pills that you need a prescription for. One of the things that you can do, depending on what your medication is you can just talk to your doctor and let your doctor know, hey doc, look, I'm into preparedness. I'm into, emergency preparedness. I have a 2 week supply of food. I have this, that, and the other. Would it be possible for you to prescribe me an additional month or an additional 2 months of this medicine so that I'm always cycling through? Is that possible? It's not possible with every medication. Some of this stuff
Right,
has a very short shelf life, but just
right.
talk to your doctor and see, is that a possibility? Can we do that? That way, if you do end up in that situation, you're not, you've got some breathing room.
And with diabetes in particular, there's some natural remedies to help with diabetes too, so you can kind of prolong that medicine out as well.
100%. And in the topic of antibiotics, this is actually something I'm looking into, is having antibiotics on hand. So for our viewers that may be watching this in the future many years, or for people that just have social amnesia that have forgotten, when that recent health crisis that shut the world down took place, one of the supply chain issues that we were running into was that all of our medication was produced in China.
Yeah.
Okay, that means that there was actually shortages of medication that people needed. So one of the things I'm looking into, and there's a couple of different companies now that are doing this that weren't doing this before, but there's a company called Jace Medical. You can buy, and they have a legal system for all this. You're going to become a registered a registered patient with an actual physician. They're going to do a video consultation with you. They're going to go over your medical history. They're going to put you through the whole process, but a licensed physician will prescribe a year's worth of antibiotics for you, all of the major antibiotics. And so you can have that as part of your emergency preparations and just have it there as an insurance policy. And once a year, you order a new kit. You consult with your physician, and your physician will determine whether or not you need a new kit. So a couple of years ago, that wasn't the thing. A couple of years, especially during the whole health crisis, people were talking about taking fish antibiotics and buying over-the-counter fish antibiotics and super dosing it to where it was the human dose.
Animal by
Yeah,
antibiotics, yeah.
yeah. So there are lots of options now, and so it's important for you to start taking into consideration the needs of your family.
And I think that kind of goes along with supplies. We've discussed that. I also wrote training. In this particular movie, this is the first time these people are ever touching a gun. I don't suggest your first time touching a gun being during a localized or national SHTF situation.
And again,
um,
movie was filmed in 1996.
yeah,
And you saw everybody was swarming the only gun store in town.